Hi, my name is Joe Rabinowitz, and I am a volunteer tour guide for Beit Weizmann, or the Weizmann House. Weizmann House is the first official presidential residence of the first president of the State of Israel, but it was built as a private residence for the Weizmann family. The question arises, why did they decide to build here in the Mosheva, farmland of grapefruits and oranges? Why did they decide they wanted to build it here in Rehovot? It would make more sense if you're already going to live in Israel. Why don't you want to live in Yerushalayim, Jerusalem? Or even more so, why not go to the first new city, Tel Aviv, which was built in modern times at that time, modern times by the Jewish people, the first Jewish city, but he picked here. And the reason is, although this was an agricultural area, the first experimental agricultural station was actually established here. So there was already a base. Then when he decided that he wanted to have a scientific institute here, it was only natural for him to develop and to build what was then known as the Dan Yosef Institute. And when he decided to move here, it was obvious. So therefore he bought on a hill 12.5 acres of land, and he built this home. Now when he built this home, he brought over an architect from Germany. He was renowned in Germany but not known throughout the world. His name is Erich Mendelsohn, and the first house he built was here. Now Hayam said to him, I want a house that's unassuming. I want a small home, a modest home, because here everybody lived in maybe one-room homes, two-room homes. But what Erich had said to him was, you represent the Jewish people. You are the leader of the Jewish people. You meet with presidents, prime ministers, and kings. You are a diplomat. You are what I should say, you are the first foreign minister of a nation that does not yet exist. You must have a house that's commensurate with who you are. And luckily for the state of Israel, they built this house. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a number of the rooms, and you will see that when the state of Israel was established in 1948, the presidential home looked like the home of a president. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a number of the rooms here, and we're going to start with the dining room. Now, if you'll notice, as you come in this way, we're going to cross the road. Now, we're going to cross the road together, and therefore you're going to see a number of items here that normally most people don't see. By the way, the reason I became a tour guide is that I've always wanted to go behind the road. So now you have the opportunity to join me. What you're seeing now is on the table. Everything you see here are the originals. The dishes, the cutlery, the glassware, even the candlesticks. Everything you see here are the originals. Everything you will see in the house, including the carpets, the stone floors, the stairwell, and so on, everything is the original except for the air conditioning system, the smoke detectors, and the curtains. Now the curtains, of course, deteriorated over years, but we did find a piece of the original material, and from that we were able to replicate it. So everything that you're going to see now is the original. This became the official dining room when he had guests from overseas. Everything you see, as I said, is the original, including the Judaica. For example, what you have here is a beautiful painting that he received when they had gone down to South Africa. When Vera and Hayam flew down there, he received as a gift from the Zionist Federation of South Africa this painting. So everything you see here are originals. They were either gifts or purchased. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to go on to the library. And again, as I said, everything is the original. Come with me now. Let's go through here. Now, although this house was built in 1934, the house was built in 1934 and 1936. So let's make it 1936. Of course, being a volunteer, I get some things mixed up. But in 1936, the house was built. And even though it was built in 1936, here I am going over the road. Even though the house was built in 1936, I could live here today. It's a beautiful home. It's very warm. Now, although this is the home of Hayam Weizmann, it should be the home of Vera Weizmann because she actually handled everything that you see here today. Now, if you look behind me, do you see the library? Here we have over 1,200 books, and they represent the two loves of his life. Not the women, the two loves of his life. They're divided into two parts: science, Judaism, Zionism. And they're written in 6 languages. 6 languages which he read, wrote, and spoke as a mother tongue. He was a highly intelligent man, highly successful, and when he met with prime ministers, kings, and leaders of the world, he didn't have a problem explaining when he wanted to fight the fight and explain why the Jews should have their own homeland, should have their own army. He didn't need a translator. He was able to speak to them in their own languages. Now, if you come with me over here, I want to introduce you to his mother, who for some reason has disappeared from and it's not here. Where is she? Ah, there she is, Mama. This is Rachaleah. Hayam's family lived in a little village in Motul in Russia. They were middle class. The father was a timber merchant. And the mother, as you can see here, she may not be very impressive, but she had 15 children. Of the 12 children, 12 of them grew to adulthood, and they were all highly educated. Because Rachaleah was a very special woman. She and her husband were members of an organization called the Haskalah movement. What is Haskalah? Haskalah means education or academia. Now, Jews historically have always been literate because we have the Torah. The rabbis would teach the children from the ages of 3, 4, or 5, boys and girls if the parents wanted. The rest of the world, the only ones who could read and write were the aristocrats and the clergy. What happened was that when we had the period of enlightenment in Europe, when the universities opened up to the world, the only ones who didn't participate were Jews. Jews were afraid. Jews were terribly afraid because there were pogroms, there was racism, and there was anti-Semitism. And this movement, the Haskalah movement, was created where it said, world, Jews of the world, you have a golden opportunity. Take advantage of this opportunity and seek out education. She was one of the pushers when it came to this because she believed that the true success of an individual is based on knowledge and education. I will show you afterwards very briefly pictures of her children, and you will see all the boys and the girls were highly educated. And this was what made Hayam Weizmann the vision, and this helped him with his vision. Now here is where he sat, and you see over here, this is where Vera sat. Vera and Hayam sat opposite each other. Right? And here is where they would write letters. You can call this the first pre-internet center or library. Why? Because although they didn't have an internet, this is where they wrote letters. And they wrote thousands of letters. Whether he be as a businessman, whether it be as a leader of the Jewish people, whether it be with political leadership, here is where he wrote. He responded to all his letters. We even have a center down the hill from this house where we have the archives of all the letters that we wrote, and we're talking about thousands. Now Vera, when she became the first lady, she also received numerous letters from many Israelis because we were living in a time of austerity. The first 10 years of the state of Israel, there was austerity, and everyone would write to her for help. She might not have been able to help them, but what she could do was write them a response, and we have copies of those letters. Now over here, sitting on her table, we have the pictures of her family. Of course, mother. We have 2 sons, Michael and Benjamin. Now they never made Aliyah, they never immigrated to Israel, because when Hayam and Vera decided to come here, they were adults. They wanted to live in the United Kingdom. They were very happy. During World War II, they were either enlisted or they were drafted, and Michael became a pilot in the Royal Air Force. He became a pilot in the Royal Air Force, and then during World War II, his plane was shot down over Basque Country, Spain, and his body was never found. Hayam and Vera always had hope that they would find the body. They were hoping maybe he had amnesia. And in fact, if we look at the picture of Vera over here, if you look at the picture, you will see wings in her hat. Those wings were actually the wings that Michael used to wear as a pilot for the Air Force. And in fact, Hayam even called her my wounded bird because they never gave up hope. In fact, in their estate, when it says in the estate, when they opened up the will, they found that besides giving the house and all the lands to the state of Israel, there was a little clause that said, Michael, if you're reading this, we never gave up hope. You were entitled to A, B, C, and D. Of course, he did not survive. Now, if we look here on the table, we can see some of the close friends that they had. Here we have, remember this guy? Albert Einstein. Now, when Hayam was elected to president of the World Zionist Organization, he wanted to go to the United States to raise money. And he took his good friend Albert, and they went to the United States. And with the money that they raised, they actually laid the cornerstone for the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Because Hayam believed that science and knowledge, science and education were the two most important parameters for the success of a nation. When Israel was established in 1948, there was terrible austerity. You needed coupons to buy bread, to buy cheese, to buy milk. But anyone who worked here, all the scientists who worked at the Institute, lacked for nothing. Why? Because Hayam said, we may be an independent nation, but you can't be truly independent if you don't have an economy. You can't have an economy if you don't have industry. You can't have industry if you don't have the universities, and you can't have the universities unless you have scientists. And he believed that science and education were the two most important parameters for the success of this nation. Sound familiar? Where did he get it from? Mama, right? What did Mama say? Education and knowledge are very important, and he followed through with it. Now here we have some pictures of Lord Balfour, of Winston Churchill. All of them were friends of his. Now Hayam Weizmann had over 220 patents to his name. But one of the most important patents, which actually made him the success that he was for acetone. Acetone was very important, and it was used during World War II. If you look at the picture of Winston Churchill, during World War I, he was the Lord of the Admiralty, and he came to Hayam and said, Hayam, we need your patent for acetone, because acetone is one of the important increments in use of making weapons for ammunition. And what they needed was, when they had battleships and would shoot off a missile, they didn't need a trail of smoke showing them where that battleship was. Of course, today it's irrelevant with radar and so on. But at that time it was very important. Hayam gave him the patent. After World War II, he received the patent back, and according to a document that we found in the archives, we know that he made over $30 million just from that one patent. He had over 220 patents to his name, but from that one alone, he made $30 million. That gave him the money for the base to fund himself, so he'd be free to actually work for the Jewish people without worrying where he's going to be able to eat or sleep and so on. Now over here we have another picture, and I'd love to point her out. This is a picture of Queen Elizabeth. But if you don't recognize her, it's not Queen Elizabeth of the United Kingdom, it's Queen Elizabeth of Belgium, who was a close friend of the family. Why do I like to point her out? Because she was a very special woman. I actually Googled her when I started to work here, and I found out that during World War II, she used her position as Queen of Belgium to safeguard and help hundreds of Jews flee the Nazis and not be persecuted. So therefore, she was one of the first to receive the reward for righteous among the nations. And this was a special woman. By the way, the same picture you can see by Ben Gurion's house down in Stable Kale. There she writes, my good friend. Here she didn't write it, and I wondered why, and I figured maybe because he knew that she was a good friend. Now I want to show you one more thing in this room, which I find very touching. Here we have a picture. It was a picture that was given to the President Weizmann on his 75th birthday by Yigal Yadin, who was the second commander-in-chief of the armed forces. What greater gift can you give an individual who believed, who had the vision that the Jews would have their own nation and their own army? What did he do? What did he do? He took all the epaulets of the forces that existed at that time in 1952, and what he did was he created this collage of all the forces to give to the president. What could be more emotional or touching to an individual to see the fruits of his labor? Now from here we're going to go into the guard room. Not the guard, but the garderobe, as we say in Hebrew. The garderobe room. I want to show you some pictures. Ah, where did you go? I thought you got lost. Come with me. Over here we see the family. And you see these are the 12 children. These are the 12 children. Here's Hayam. Now, if we look, here's his mother and his father. That's Oizer and Rachaleah. You can see the family looks quite established. They were middle class. But if you look here, you'll see the children. Now, remember what I said? The mother believed in Haskalah, education. Fruma, the daughter, she immigrated in 1913. She was a dentist. Anna, his sister, she had a PhD in chemistry. We're talking 140 years ago. What woman went to university? What woman became a doctor? Look at here. You have Mina. She was a pediatrician in Hadassah Hospital. Here is his brother Yechiel, who had a son, Ezer Weizmann, who also became the 7th president of the State of Israel. But here you can see the proof of a woman, his mother, who truly believed in the knowledge and education of the fundamentals of the success of the individual. But if we're already in this room, I want to show you one more item which is really nice. Here is the passport of the President of the State of Israel. Look carefully. Do you see the number on the passport? 00001. Now the question arises, who got number 2? If you were to say to me that it was Ben Gurion, I would basically say that you're a chauvinist. Because number 2 went to Vera. Who got number 3? The third person, of course, was David Ben Gurion. Did it cause a conflict? I don't believe it caused a conflict because of that, but there are other stories we can talk about, and the next time we come here. Here's Vera Weizmann. She was a very special woman, a very important woman in her own right. What she did was she opened up this place, she opened up her home. During the time of austerity, there was also the polio epidemic. And what she did is she opened up her home as a rehabilitation center for the children of Israel who had polio for many, many, many years. Also, in her position as First Lady, she also became the honorary president of Magen David Adom. And in that capacity, she opened up rehabilitation centers for wounded soldiers throughout the country. But come, let's go on now. I want to show you her living room or her salon, which is quite impressive. But while we're going there, I'm going to show you 2 sculptures, two busts. Over here, we have a bust of Hayam Weizmann, and here we have a bust of Lord Balfour. And there's a story that goes behind it. Hayam Weizmann, when he first met with Lord Balfour said to him, I understand that you want to have a refuge for the Jewish people because of persecution. Why would you want to go to Palestine? There's pestilence, there's disease, there's typhus, there's poverty, there's not enough water. Let me give you Uganda. Use that even as a temporary refuge until times progress and we can decide what to do. And Hayam Weizmann thought about that, he contemplated it, and he said, Lord Balfour, if I were to tell you, let me give you Paris instead of London to be the capital of the British Empire, what would you say? He was horrified. He said, oh my God, how could that be? London is the heart and soul of the British Empire. Well, Hayam then said to him, well, if I were to tell you that 2,000 years ago, when London was still a marshland, Jerusalem became and remained the heart and soul of the Jewish people. And that is why he decided that he wanted Jerusalem and Israel to be the new old home of the Jewish people and not Uganda. But now let's go on to the, and I should point out that at their next meeting, it said that, Balfour said to him, you've convinced me I am a Zionist. Okay, we are now in the salon, in the living room. And this room is actually a mirror of the library. It looks exactly the same in the shape. And what we see here is something very unique. We actually have 2 living rooms. We have one that's very European and one that is not. And there's a reason for it. I mentioned before in the other room that Vera was a very strong and dynamic woman. Very, very strong. She was not a feminist, but she believed that a woman had the obligation to fulfill her potential. Now what happened was, when she wanted to design the room, the architect, Eric Mendelsohn, said, when I design a house, I don't just design the walls, but all the details that come in with it. Meaning even the smallest details, such as the teaspoon, I'm the one that decides. And she said, excuse me, time out, sweetheart. And she just said, I will decide what my house looks like. but in reality, they actually negotiated. And as you see, we actually have two living rooms. The one on the right is overstuffed furniture, very warm and comfortable, very European. And over here, we have one that looks more Middle Eastern, because Eric Mendelsohn believed that Israel was actually the crossroads, as we've learned in history, the crossroads of three great continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. So over here we have her living room, which is European, and on this side what we have what looks like the Middle East. It could be a Bedouin tent. If you look at the materials on the couches, which by the way Vera chose, and what you have on the walls, on the very end of the walls where the painting is, you have all these little shmunzes or tchotchkes, which are very Far East. So what you have is the Far East, the Middle East or Asia, you have Europe. And this is what he tried to show in the house, that the house was very international. Now, none of the other items that we have here, everything is from Vera, and as I said, as gifts, including this horse which she actually bought on an auction. It's from the, I always say the Ming, but it's the Tang dynasty. But one of the dynasties, the Chinese dynasties, and this she actually had chosen. Of course, now it belongs to the state of Israel because, as I said before, in her will, together with Hayam, everything in the house and all the lands were given to the state of Israel. All right. All the paintings, even here, the drawing room, everything that you have is from her, their own personal collection. Now, we're going to go now to the most important room in the house, especially for Jewish families. We're going to go into the kitchen. Now, the kitchen is very special in that it's state-of-the-art of the 1930s. It was based on efficiency, which means you had a room that was a pantry, you had a place for cooking, and a place for washing up. And this is my favorite item in the house. Over here, you have a refrigerator. It reminds me because my grandmother in the Bronx, she had one just like this, the same General Electric refrigerator. Now, when we had a lot of children coming here from schools to learn about the first president, and when you ask them, what is this, they have no idea. They actually think it's a UFO, an unidentified flying object. They have no idea that this is a refrigerator. What makes it so unique? Who had a refrigerator in 1936 in this country? Maybe pharmacists did, but everybody had the ice boxes. So it was very unique. Come inside to the kitchen. And here we have all the original items that belonged to them. I love to show this one item here, which I show. This is an official presidential item. Do you know what this is? This is the official, and if you notice, it has the emblem of the state of Israel. This is the emblem for the president of the state of Israel. This is the official orange squeezer of the president, the first president of the state of Israel. Did he squeeze his oranges? I doubt it very strongly, but this is actually a presidential item. If we go into the kitchen, we can see it was state-of-the-art, because in those days, who had a kitchen? You might have had a little thing that you could put on a tabletop in order to cook, but here she actually lived here. And the first oven that she had was Wedgwood, and we all know what Wedgwood is. This was the original oven. And later on, when electricity came out, she actually had 2 electric ovens as well, and a real refrigerator as we know it today. This is the kitchen as you see it. It was in use. Did she do the cooking? I'm sure maybe she did some of it, but most of it was probably done with other help. Come, we're going to go now see another item that might be of more interest to the men. We're going to go see the first presidential car. So come with me. We'll go there quickly. If you look at the stoneware and everything that you see, it is all original. As we walk to the presidential car, you can now see the house from the outside, and you can see the gardens. Now you see the windows? They look like portals of a boat. And if you look on top, if you look at the tower, it actually looks like the bridge of a boat. And if you remember, I mentioned the house had a number of names. Here it actually looks like Noah's Ark. Why? It was the ingathering of the exiles. They didn't come on Dreamliners, they came on ships. Now here we have the first presidential car. If you look at it, it's in perfect condition, it's in pristine condition, and there's a reason for it. The car was actually a gift from the Ford company, given by Mr. Ford himself in 1950. There are only 18 cars in the series. It's a Ford Lincoln Cosmopolitan. When he received it the first car was actually given to President Truman. The second car was given to Hayam Weizmann, and there were 16 other cars in the series. When Hayam got the car, he was way ahead of his time. He didn't like it. Why? He called it a gas guzzler, because it only got 3.8 kilometers to the liter, which means to go from his house to the city, he probably needed 2 petrol stations just to get there. Now the car was actually in a very poor state. I have friends who live in Rehovot, and they remember seeing it many, many years in a rusted situation. In the 1990s, the Ford company from Canada shipped it over back to Canada, where it was redone, and everything, including the engine, is in perfect condition. The reason it's behind glass and we're not worried about being stolen is because it actually sits on 4 posts, and secondly, you need a fortune of money just to fill it up with petrol. The car, as you see it, actually they start it once a year. They ignite it, they put on the engine to see that it works. The car is actually higher than any of the other cars in the series because Hayam Weizmann was an aristocrat. He was a British aristocrat. And what did British aristocrats wear on their head? Top hats. And no aristocrat would take off his hat when he went into the car. So this car is actually higher than most of the others. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the grave of Hayam and Vera, because they are actually buried here right outside the house. The house I didn't mention but it's actually part today of the Weizmann Institute. The house is now maintained through the help of the government and also of the Institute. And here, what we're doing now is we're going to go now to see the grave site. Watch your step. It's very, very beautiful here. Unfortunately today with the heat, but other than the heat, it's truly beautiful to be here and see it. Okay, if we look carefully, we'll see here is the tombstone. The tombstone is actually very simple. When Hayam had passed away, his tombstone was actually just a little marker in the ground, and it said his name and his date of birth and death. And the reason it was very simple is he said, I may have become what I have become, but I will always be that little boy from Motul in Russia. He never forgot who he was. In that respect, he was very modest. When Vera died, she decided she wanted to have a tombstone that looked like this, and this is actually designed after the tomb of the unknown soldier in the United Kingdom, because of her son, Michael, who had died, and his body was never found. And here too, you'll see it's very, very simple. It mentions their names: Hayam Weizmann on the right, Vera on the left. It has the date of birth and death, and in the middle, you see the symbol or the logo for the Weizmann Institute. Why? Because the Weizmann Institute was actually their 3rd child. They loved it dearly, and they developed and nurtured it. And today the Weizmann Institute basically follows through on the vision of Hayam Weizmann, on the success of encouraging development and so on. The Institute is leads in many aspects of science, and this is all due to Hayam Weizmann. And thank you very much for joining me. I wish the next time after Corona is over, you'll come here personally, because I have a lot better stories and jokes which I can tell, which will not be being taped, that I can tell you in person. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.